I took a job as a night security guard at a museum. And it wasn't just the art that came alive. I'd been searching for work for over a month when I got a bizarre email from a hiring agency I didn't even remember signing up with. They offered me a job as a night security guard at the Aldridge Museum, a historic place full of ancient artifacts, Renaissance art, and creepy taxidermied animals. The pay was better than anything I'd seen recently, and I needed the cash. The only catch was that they insisted I'd need to work every night, including weekends. Apparently, previous guards had quit after a few weeks or months, which should have been a red flag. But the desperation of unemployment and rent looming over me erased any caution. I signed the contract the next day. On my first night, I was introduced to Dave, the day shift guard who'd been around the museum longer than anyone. Dave was in his late 50s with a shaggy beard and a face that looked like it had seen things he'd rather not discuss. He gave me a brief, nervous smile before leading me through the dimly lit hallways. "So, anything I need to know?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. Dave hesitated. "Yeah, a few things. First, never leave your post by the Egyptian exhibit after midnight. Second, don't respond to any noises unless you're absolutely certain someone's in danger. And third," he scratched his beard and looked me dead in the eye, "if you see anything move that shouldn't, just don't make eye contact." I laughed, assuming he was trying to mess with me, but Dave's face stayed serious. His eyes had a haunted look as he turned to leave. I spent most of my shift wandering the hallways, checking locked doors, and admiring the art I'd only seen in textbooks. Everything was silent until around 1 a.m., when I heard a distinct scraping sound coming from the Egyptian exhibit. I remembered Dave's warning, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed the sound to find a row of ancient sarcophagi. The scraping grew louder, and I realized it was coming from the largest sarcophagus, the one that held the mummy of Kahotep, a priest whose mummified remains were said to be cursed. Just as I leaned in closer, the lid moved. It didn't fly off or anything dramatic, it was just a slight shift, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. I backed away slowly, but before I could turn around, the lights flickered, and I felt a sudden chill that was bone deep. The lid shifted back into place, and silence returned. I practically sprinted back to my post. I didn't sleep that day, and the next night, I showed up with a coffee thermos the size of my head. A few nights later, things got even stranger. I was making my rounds when I noticed something in the room with the taxidermy animals. In the dim light, I could have sworn one of the stuffed wolves was turned, watching me with glassy eyes that seemed too alive. I rubbed my eyes and told myself I was imagining things, but as I turned away, I caught sight of movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow, darker than the dim lighting should have allowed, seemed to slip from one animal to another, almost like it was inspecting them. Trying to ignore the chill in the room, I hurried out. But as I reached the doorway, I felt the slightest tug at my sleeve. I glanced down, and though nothing was there, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like I'd just been warned not to return. I never entered that room again. One night, around 3 a.m., I was passing through the gallery with the Renaissance paintings when I noticed something was off. The face in one of the portraits, a nobleman with a severe expression and piercing blue eyes, seemed to be looking at me. I mean, really looking. I shook my head, figuring my exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But then his eyes seemed to move, following me as I walked across the room. I tried not to stare, but the sensation of being watched grew stronger until it felt like every portrait was silently observing me, each with a faint hint of displeasure. I was almost out of the room when I heard a whisper, soft and menacing, "Leave." I didn't need to be told twice. After a week of these eerie encounters, I finally saw Dave again during a brief shift overlap. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept much. I asked him straight up if the museum was haunted. Dave let out a long sigh. "Listen, I don't know if it's ghosts or curses or something else entirely, but there's something wrong here. I've seen things too. I think it's tied to some of the items. especially that mummy. He then told me a story from a few years back about a former night guard who dared to touch the mummy's sarcophagus. The man was never the same after that night, Day said. He quit abruptly and was later found wandering the city, raving about curses and ancient eyes watching him. One night, I heard footsteps, not just any footsteps, heavy, deliberate ones echoing down the hall. I felt a pull, like something was urging me toward the Egyptian exhibit. Against all reason, I found myself moving toward the sound. As I reached the exhibit, the lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across the sarcophagi. The scraping sound returned, but this time it was louder, accompanied by a deep, guttural groan. My heart raced as I realized the lid of the sarcophagus was slowly lifting, inch by inch. Cold sweat dripped down my forehead as an ancient, skeletal hand reached out, pulling itself free. I wanted to scream, but fear had stolen my voice. I took a shaky step back, then another, and finally managed to turn and run. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. I'd left my post, probably violated every rule of the contract, but I didn't care. I couldn't spend another second in that place. The next morning, I called the museum to quit. But before I could say a word, the person on the other end cut me off. "We understand," they said. Their tone was eerily calm. "You're not the first." I didn't go back to pick up my things. I didn't even wait for my last paycheck. A few days later, I received a package in the mail with my belongings from the museum, along with a handwritten note. Some secrets are best left undisturbed. To this day, I sometimes hear strange noises in my apartment, and on some nights, I catch a glimpse of shadows that seem too familiar. I don't dare visit another museum, and I never, ever let my curiosity get the better of me. This story can be expanded with further encounters and details, and you could definitely add some cliffhangers, twists, and additional layers of suspense and mystery to reach 12,000 characters if needed. The pacing could also vary between eerie build-up moments and high-tension scares to make the story even more gripping.